So hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the Living the Dream podcast, a podcast for real estate agents that discusses strategies to grow your business to its maximum potential, while at the same time making sure that you're in control of your career and have the time to live a balanced life. So I'm Linas, Kilius, head of business development at Homeania, and with me, as always, is the co-host of the podcast and broker and general manager of Century 21 Heritage Group, Eryn Richardson. Eryn, how's it going?
Great, Linus. How are you?
Not too bad. I actually, my car last night started having issues. Have you ever had that feeling that your car is about to kick the bucket? Like nothing's wrong with it quite. I mean, it's almost 300,000 kilometers in the car, so I feel like it's like nearing the end of its life. But I'm starting to get that feeling. I was driving to hockey last night, and one of my headlights burnt out on the drive, which usually wouldn't be a problem, but the other headlight was already burnt out, so I had no headlights in the middle of the night. I had to drive half the way with my high beams on, which I'm sure annoyed the hell out of quite a few drivers coming the opposite direction for me. But this morning I heard like a little bit of a whistling coming from the back and like shaking a little bit more than usual. So I'm doing a lot better in my car, is needless to say.
Nice. Oh, that's great. Well, I hope you get your car fixed.
I could absolutely relate to that because I had our family Suburban, which was not a pretty vehicle, died unceremoniously the other week, like maybe just a week ago. So yeah, it had 342,000 kilometers on it. So
yeah, you can feel it coming. It's almost like you have a sense for your car after you've got it for a long enough a period of time. You know when it's about to go on you.
Yeah.
But I think I'm getting a little too deep into that. So today, what we're going to be talking about on the real estate podcast, this isn't an auto podcast, is professional insurance. In order to sell real estate, you need to have it. It's a necessary evil that covers you if you make any mistakes when you're representing your clients in transactions, right? Well, it's a great safety blanket. You still need to make sure that you're careful to take steps to avoid opening yourself up to litigation. In the event that happens, you want to make sure that you're properly covered by your insurer. So on the show today, we're going to cover two specific insurance-related situations that almost every agent will come across at some point in their career and discuss the best courses of action and potential pitfalls. For instance, what happens if you're both the client and the realtor in a transaction? It turns out that representing yourself as a realtor when buying or selling your own home can lead to some unexpected situations when it comes to your professional liability insurance. If you make a mistake, can you sue yourself for damages? I don't know. That's why we bring our guest today. But the other situation, too, that we're going to be talking about, maybe you're representing a client that's buying or selling a property that has an illegal second suite or basement apartment. I mean, having a property with an apartment can be a great way to supplement income on a very attractive selling feature on a listing. The only problem is that so many apartments aren't registered or just flat out illegal. So bringing them up to code and registering them is obviously can be a very cumbersome and potentially very expensive process. So a lot of people just opt to not worry about that, sell the property as it is, and turn a blind eye to the issue and hope it doesn't come back to bite them at the end of the day. So if you're representing a client looking to turn this blind eye, how do you handle this? What are the liabilities to both the client and to you as a realtor, and what sort of risks involved? And there's no one better to talk to this about than Ryan Durrell. Ryan is Axxima's principal broker, CIO, and principal of the risk and insurance management service practice. Ryan has over 15 years of actuarial, general insurance, and risk management experience and operates in each of the actuarial, brokering, underwriting, and management areas. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about my business, which is apparently a necessary evil.
I've
never heard insurance called evil right to my face before, but only behind my back.
Only on this show.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, a lot of the viewers right now might say, "Oh, insurance is on this week." That's boring. But we've had some really good conversations, Ryan, the two of us, and I love to bring it to the podcast because these are great issues that, like Linus says, comes up so often. So I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think what's interesting about the insurance program is let's just get it out out front. We are the managers for the RICO insurance program, but we are not RICO. And our position on issues is distinctly different from the RICO, the ethics side of things and the registration process and so on. So when you talk to us as your insurer, and if you call in and have a question, then you'll reach either me or my colleague Megan, and we'll field your question. If you have a claim, then you're going to go to the claims department, which is separate and uniquely different from me, and I don't have insights. I don't have input into the way claims are managed. All I can do is advocate on your behalf. So look at me as your point of contact for questions. If you're having any service issues or so on, then talk to me about it. If you're in a claim scenario, you'll already have contacts within the program on the claim side, which is separate. And we do not discuss our claims issues with RICO on a names basis. Of course, they have great oversight over the program, and we'll share with them high level stats because that's important for them to help us risk manage and so on. But we don't have that sort of open relationship with RICO on claims issues at an individual level, unless you call RICO and say, I have this claims issue and I want you to reach out to the insurer on my behalf, in which case you've asked them to do that, and we'll discuss it at a high level as long as it doesn't compromise the claim. So that was probably about as boring as the insurance discussion will get today, I hope.
But you must get that a lot. You must get that a lot.
Yeah.
People calling and talking to you, and they're almost saying, well, almost assuming you're RICO. I mean, whenever you're dealing with something, you're always thinking you're dealing with RICO, and meanwhile, there's different components that they bring in, third parties, brokers, and people that manage the RICO insurance. So we appreciate that.
Our advice is completely different. So my advice about how to handle a situation will be totally different from RICO's, not because we're not in sync and want the best for people, but because RICO's mandate is consumer protection, and it's about following the regs, and all guided by REBA 2002, whereas my advice is coming from a risk management standpoint, from this is what claim scenarios come up, and how you should best manage them to avoid them. Which will not necessarily jive with RICO will say you can do this, and I'll say you should never do that. And that's okay, because they're two different perspectives.
Now, you had actuary in some of the stuff that Linas was talking about. I learned a long time ago what that was, because I had a guy I went to school with, and he was really good at math, like really good. Does that mean you're really good at math?
I've been called that before. I've also been called worse to my face, but I started in the insurance industry on the actuarial practice side, and I had gone down that path, and then moved into general insurance brokerage and insurance program management. And our firm, which for the purposes of program management we call Alternative Risk Services, that'll be the name that registrants are familiar with. We manage insurance programs. We manage insurance companies. We are not a typical insurance broker, so we provide a whole suite of services to the program which are not traditional broker. And if you call me and you say, "Hey Ryan, I need insurance for this reason," you're going to get a completely unsalesy view of, yes, buy that, don't buy that, you don't need this, because that's I'm not here to sell you more policies. So not an insurance broker in the traditional sense.
Well, you've made me a lot more comfortable talking to you with all those fine points and disclaimers too. I feel like we're getting a nice unbiased opinion, which I know is what most people want to hear as well. So let's get into the meat of the show. The first thing I mentioned off the top that we want to talk about today is the situation where as a realtor, you're selling your own home, and what kind of pitfalls that brings along with it. Now I'm going to turn to Eryn first, being a manager of realtors. And if Eryn, I came to you and I said, "Hey Eryn, I'm thinking of selling my own home as a realtor," would you say that's a good idea?
I'd say you're crazy. Plumbers have the worst plumbing, and, maybe insurance people have the worst insurance. From Ryan's standpoint, I'm sure you have good insurance, but realtors are, I've bought and sold many homes, and I've never used myself to do that. I've always had somebody that look after it. And just from a sales perspective, not from a liability perspective, from a sales perspective, we feel that, it's hard to sell your own home. I mean, to look at your home from the eyes of a buyer, you're just not going to be able to get that perspective, whether it be from a staging standpoint, whether it be from, when I went to sell my house, I actually undervalued it. I said, this was maybe 8 years ago when I sold my last house. And the guy that looked after the sale of my house came to me and said, no, I think we can get $20,000 more based on this, and this. I said, okay, give it a shot. And sure enough, he got me an extra 20,000 just because I don't know what it was, and most sellers overpriced their house, and we had that situation happen recently as well. And I keep telling people, guys, there's so many different reasons, not just from a sales perspective. So I'm sure we're going to hear from Ryan's perspective on the, whether or not it's from a liability perspective, important, but definitely from a sales perspective, selling or buying your own home, you need somebody. The personal attachment that you have, whether on a purchase or on a sale, it gets in the way.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of agents might take the other stance, be like, well, I can save so much money, in commission fees. Like, why am I paying someone else to sell my home when I can do it myself, right? I'm sure that's probably the argument for the flip side. You think that outweighs that then?
Well, and let's say I would have paid the person that helped me sell my house, but I helped sell his house. We go back and forth and help each other out. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a cost thing. Right. I've had agents within my office ask me as the manager to go on and put my name on it. Now they did it from, and this maybe is where I have a question for Ryan. They did it from a liability perspective. They thought by having their name on the listing means that they're negated in insurance because they're selling their own house. And, after having spoke to Ryan in the past, that's not necessarily the case. So, from a sales standpoint, stress standpoint, being objective or not being as subjective, it's just a good idea to not be putting yourself in a position where you're negotiating a deal that you personally have such an attachment to.
Well, Eryn's talked to Ryan about this in the past, so how about we talk to Ryan about this in the present, since we've got him here?
Well, this is the most common question we get. So when we get questions to the program, the most common question by like a long shot is, hey, if I sell my own home, do I not have insurance? Somebody told me that. The fact of the matter is, no, your insurance is still intact if you sell your own property. And if you call us, we'll send you an email and says all the things you need to do to make sure that your coverage is still intact, which is a whole ream of disclosure requirements from REBA 2002 and the regulations. So you need to follow those disclosure requirements. But assuming you do that, then the coverage is not negated, so you do have coverage. I will add that this is the only province in the country whose insurance program covers sale or purchase of your own property. Everywhere else in the country, they say, nope, not covered, flat out. So actually, one of the provincial programs, the fellow that managed it, he said to me, why on earth would you do that? You're crazy. I think he actually used stronger language than that, but I'm cleaning it up for the podcast here.
Nice.
But so you can do it. And then you'll find that we immediately say, please don't do that. That's just really not a good idea. So get somebody else involved. It doesn't negate your coverage to do it for yourself. But here's the issue is that you are now the seller and the professional. And if you're just a seller, like if you're just a non-registrant selling a home, you do have potential liability in selling your home. Failure to disclose some information or so on, and you could be sued as a seller. And your homeowner's insurance may respond to that and provide you some coverage. But if you're the professional, then you have your RICO insurance. And where is the separation between the two? Right? Can you really point to yourself and say, man, I blew that. I did a terrible job as a professional. No, you're probably, like most people, not going to do that. You're going to say it was the other side. And you're going to be looking for the insurance program to cover your professional mistake. Well, if you had another professional in place, their insurance may respond. But you've blurred the lines. Where does it start and stop between being the seller and being the professional?
Just to clarify too, this is for Ontario, just in case we've got any listeners out of province.
Yeah, right.
We're talking
Good
about provincial
point.
regulations and everything, just so everyone's clear on that one. Eryn, I think you had a bit of an anecdote, didn't you, about someone who was trying to sue themselves at one point or something along those lines? You want to tell that?
Well, we've had these discussions with the real estate agents. You know, I have wife is a real estate agent. They sell their own home or purchase a home for that matter, and then something comes up, and they said, "Well, yeah, there was issues, let's say in the basement or whatever it is," and then the husband says, "Well, I know you can't sue yourself, but what if I sue you?" So people try and get around. Having the registrant be the person that represented themselves, and then have a spouse try and sue to get the RICO insurance, to represent them. These are just stories that you hear people go through, and of course that's probably why Ryan gets so many calls on this, is they want to make sure that one, they're protected, but I mean, do you have people that are trying to take advantage of the system too?
Well, the insurance program is for all of the Ontario realtors, right, or registrants as we call them. But you're forced to buy it from RICO, right? It's part of your registration process, and as such, it takes a different view on things than, say, a standard insurer would. So we need to look at it from a fairness perspective. Would you feel good if somebody sold their own home and they didn't disclose that the parking was not a legal parking spot downtown Toronto, made extra money, and then the insurance program came in and paid the whole claim from the buyer who found it was an illegal parking spot, saying I overpaid because this parking's not legal? Should the insurance program come in and cover the cost of paying for that, non-disclosure about illegal parking? I think you'd feel pretty angry if you're like, no, that scenario is not right. If it was a standard insurer, they might pay it because economically it made sense to do that. But we feel you'd have to sort of take it to the mat and say, you know what, this is your responsibility as a seller. I know you acted as a professional, but you don't ask yourself whether parking is legal or not legal. So getting back to where's the line between professional and seller? Should we pay $100,000 to the buyer on behalf of a registrant who sold their own home? Or should we say, nope, not covered? Which position would you take from an outside view? Now you might say, well, I'm really pissed at my insurance company for not covering this loss because I just made a mistake. I was like, well, did you really make a mistake, or did you do it and make an extra $100,000 on your sale? And if you got in front of a court, what do you think the court's going to think? Oh, well, I'm a professional realtor and I sold my own home and I didn't disclose this very material fact, but it was for realsies, a real accident. I didn't mean to do it. I mean, no court in the land is going to be, oh yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. You didn't mean to make an extra $100,000. So this is why we're saying, you know what, just avoid the minefield. Hire somebody in your office, a friend, make a friendly deal with somebody else and put somebody else between you and the sale.
So where is that legal liability with regards to negligence drawn? If an agent makes a mistake and it's a mistake they didn't mean to make, I mean, you're covered typically, and you can tell me from an insurance standpoint. But if you completely negligent, you should have known better. The rules are there and you blatantly, broke a rule. At what point in time does the insurer say, sorry, you should have known better?
Well, I believe it's the first exclusion in the policies for fraud. And essentially, if you're just willfully negligent or fraudulent, then we don't owe you coverage. So
okay.
That's where the line is. If it becomes obvious that somebody willfully lied because they thought their insurance was going to clean it up and fix it, we don't have an obligation to protect you. So there is a line. Where it is exactly, I'll borrow a line from one of the program lawyers who will always respond with, well, it depends, because every claim is completely different. And there are all sorts of nuances. So I can't say, if you do this, then covered, and if you do that, then not covered. But there, if you have to ask, I like Eryn, you've told me this line before. If you have to ask, you should probably not do it, right? Should I be doing this? Probably not then.
But as an agent, like an agent walks into my office and says, Eryn, I'm selling somebody's house. I purchased them a house a couple of weeks ago, and now we have to sell their house. If it doesn't sell, am I in trouble? And I said, well, did you just, make sure and explain to the person purchasing and now selling their house that if they didn't sell their house, they're going to be in a tough position, and that you're not suggesting they do that? We have an REA form for that to disclose. And I said, did you fill out the form and make sure that they explain the risks and that they're not taking your advice to put it on the market? And they said, well, I forgot to have them sign that. And I said, well, they're kind of being negligent because they should have had them sign that. We teach that and train that, and they should have known that. But it was a mistake. They didn't have them sign it. He said he did tell them the risks. So I don't think he was negligent, but he didn't have them write it down.
That's an error or omission. That's what the coverage is for. It's for legitimate mistakes, and people make them. And most of the calls we get where it's somebody who's got the sense that something's coming forward, they'll usually lead in with, I've been at this for 20 years and I've never had something like this happen. And it's like, well, that's pretty much everybody's story. My personal, my personal view is registrants are amazing at what they do, broadly speaking, amazing. And the insurance is there for mistakes. And it's not like there's a group of people who just claim all the time and just don't know what they're doing. You're more likely, this is an unpopular view, but I usually present this when we do presentations to brokerages and larger groups. You're more likely to have a claim the longer you've been at it. So if you get 20 years into your career and you haven't had a claim yet, this is not how stats work, but it's not like you're due, but you're now more likely to have a claim than somebody that just started. And people say,
and if they do a lot more business, I've got top producers that selling 100 homes a year. And I'm like, well, guess what? The numbers are going to work against you at some point in time, because you're going to run into some problems eventually because you do so much business.
That's it. The odds get greater. If you've been at it for a long time, you're really good at what you do, right? Experience is huge. So you get really good, which means your clients expect more from you. They bring you the bigger deals. They ask you to do the more complicated things. They're savvy purchasers or sellers. You're going to get in situations that are more complicated, and they're more likely to give rise to a claim. If you're the newbie who's just, doing the simple stuff and working under supervision, you're more likely to make a mistake from the standpoint of lack of experience, but you're also not going to be put in situations where you're going to be out of your depth as often.
So the more important question, Ryan, are you ready for this one? I hear
I'm ready.
I hear you make a good pizza. You want to tell me about that?
Yeah. Eryn and I are total pizza nerds. That's kind of one of the things that makes us buddies. So, I got pretty deep into it a few years back and just kept honing the skills. But I've learned a lot since Eryn and I started sharing dough recipes and so on, techniques.
I met Ryan where we cottage, and Ryan's a couple cottages down. It was crazy because, wow, you're in real estate. Oh yeah, I'm in real estate too, sort of. And we had those discussions, had some great discussions over a campfire with regards to some of the different, obviously the stuff that we deal with every single day. And I, pick Brian's brain all the time. But as soon as a wood-fired oven was built, we started getting into the foodie stuff. And cooking stuff in that open wood-fired oven is pretty cool. And pizzas are our number one thing, right, Ryan?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't bond any more over anything than you can over good food. So just making good food and sharing good food is really like a foundation for any good relationship. That's my piece of non-insurance advice to anybody.
That's my big takeaway from the podcast. Let's start moving on to the second part of the show, because we did have another question that we want to cover before the show ends. And this one, I've got a little personal experience with basement apartments because I lived in an illegal basement apartment for several years in university. My bedroom didn't even have a window. The closet was also the furnace room. So it was quite, the attractive place to live. But if you're a realtor and you're trying to sell a house with a basement apartment like the one I lived in, there's obviously things you've got to take into consideration here. Like, should he even take the listing in the first place because of, the potential ramifications that come across later? We recently just sold my mother-in-law's home, and we made sure that the second suite wasn't a basement apartment. The second suite was up to code. We registered with the town and everything, got everything done properly. It was really expensive, and it's something that throughout the process, we kept saying, like, is this worth doing? Maybe we just sell it as is and just deal with it that way. So, Eryn, I know this is a big topic at your office. What's your office's policy on representing clients that have illegal apartments or second suites?
When we're buying or selling, and it really affects both the buying agent and the selling agent when purchasing or selling a basement apartment, is disclosure is everything, and to make sure that you're not making any representations that one has been either, and then we use the term legalized, and each municipality has a different code and guideline, and whether or not it's a registered basement apartment, and that can change. One can be very safe in one municipality and need to be registered as that, and another one could be registered and be unsafe. So there are many different issues that affect, and safety is the main thing that we want to make sure happens, and also full disclosure, whether or not you're the seller making that disclosure to a buyer purchasing property, or buyer making sure they do the due diligence to find out from the town, and whether or not their purchaser knows and understands the risks associated with what they're purchasing. So disclosure is everything, and doing your due diligence to find out ahead of time before you make the purchase or sell the house. So that's the big thing we deal with, and we deal with it quite a bit.
So if you do have a client that just wants to sell a second suite as is, that's not registered, that's not up to code, what do you typically tell your realtors to do in that situation?
Oh, if it's something, well, I mean, I've made recommendations to have it legalized, and that way the value could be more, especially if it's an area that is a high. I mean, you're selling it for the value of an income property. Having that income property with a legalized basement apartment, got to remember too, some municipalities don't allow the transfer of the legality, or the registration. So you have to look into that as well. It could be legal today, and then when it transfers to the new owner, they stop the legalization. They have to get it retrofitted or re-looked at, and it could be a whole list of new things. So there is a lot of issues that come there. But we as real estate agents, as long as we do our due diligence to find out all the things and overcome any objections to the sale, full disclosure, people feel real comfortable about purchasing something that they know everything about. So we're good with that. We're okay with that. We'll get into some questions about representing, obviously, the people that would be moving into the basement apartment as tenants in a minute, I'm sure. But no, from a sale or a purchase standpoint, completely doable. Just make sure you find out everything you can and disclose it.
Can I jump in, Linus?
Yeah.
So from the insurer's perspective, there's nothing in the policy that says, thou shalt not sell illegal apartments. That's not an exclusion under the policy. And we use the term illegal like they're, some kind of nefarious business. It means it doesn't meet bylaws, right? That's essentially the gist of it.
Essentially, yeah.
It doesn't meet bylaws, or to not have carbon monoxide testers in every bedroom, but that, we sell and buy homes all the time that don't have them. So I just want to make clear, we don't cover illegal activities on the insurance program. So if you do something illegal, probably not going to cover it. But that said, let me just say where this really comes in from a claims perspective. We do have claims, and they generally kind of dovetail with Eryn's advice. The claims come out when there's an illegal basement apartment, and you don't disclose it, right? So somebody buys what they think is a great investment property, only to find out that the town comes along and shuts them down, and then the value that they bought is not there. So disclosure is everything, and from a claims perspective, documentation is everything. Write everything down, have everything in writing, have your clients acknowledge it, and so on. So Eryn's advice to his agents is spot on with what would reduce the risk of a claim coming forward.
And is going as far as even what you think still say this is not a registered legal basement apartment when you're selling, right? Still make that, even if it is registered, sometimes you're going to say, listen, we can't make the make the disclosure, we cannot guarantee the legality or the continued use of this basement apartment, because you never know what the municipality is going to decide today or tomorrow or the next day. So if somebody purchases it and you made that disclosure saying, oh yeah, it's an income producing property and you can make this amount of money, and then they buy it and then the municipality changes hands, they could try and come after you, and they might not win on that one, but they'll still come after you and you still have to defend it. And you don't want that situation to be in. So we always side on the caution of saying, listen, we can't guarantee the continued use of that basement apartment. And we wouldn't even say basement apartment, right? We would say secondary suite, in-law suite, or something. As soon as you start saying the words basement apartment, that could even get you in a bit of a discussion about whether or not you should have or shouldn't have even called it that.
So that's basically all it comes down to, is disclosure, just making sure that every party knows exactly what they're getting into, and then we're covered.
Well,
I'm trying to spur discussion here. So
it depends. It depends.
Yeah, it depends.
Yeah. No, but let me just put it this way. Historically, we have covered claims resulting from, perceived or actual non-disclosure of the, status of a secondary suite, to use Eryn's terminology, which means that we have responded. And broadly speaking, there are not very many scenarios reported to the program where coverage, should respond that we flat deny anything. So the program is really, really broad and intended to be there for you if you make a mistake. So if you accidentally don't, make that disclosure, then it's there. But if you just love going around and selling places with illegal basement apartments to make an extra buck and not disclose it, our investigators are pretty good. They'll catch on.
So Eryn, if you are an agent that's representing someone who's looking to lease a basement apartment that may or may not be legal, are there any concerns there?
Well, yeah, and at one point, I think it was a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, we did so many representations on a landlord or tenant situation that I would say not half our business, but half our transactions almost at one point, because we like to build relationships with tenants and landlords, because landlords own homes and they're going to sell one day or purchase more investment properties, and of course tenants may purchase one day. So building those relationships is really important to us as real estate agents. But at the same time, the wall that we keep bumping into when representing a tenant or the landlord is illegal basement apartments. And again, illegal, right? We always put quotations, because if they're not registered, it could mean that they're not safe. So why would a landlord not register, first of all, right? And most of the time it's cost. Right? They essentially think it's going to cost too much to legalize what they have, or maybe it can't even get legalized because of some holdbacks of height, size of the basement or whatnot. But typically can't be registered because it's not safe. So we sort of define if it's registered as it's being safe. And if we're representing either one of them, putting anybody into a situation as risky as a basement apartment could be as little as a tin can in a hole with no windows, can be extremely dangerous. So we really, really take the care to give the advice to our agents not to represent somebody in a non-registered basement apartment, whether or not they're renting it to somebody or renting it from somebody. And we deal with this a lot. Agents often, 80% of homes in Toronto, I think they say on a rental basis, are non-registered. So how do you represent somebody in the 80% of the market? You can't put somebody in because it's not safe. And it's the safety end that bothers me the most. I would never want to be associated with helping somebody find housing and then find that somebody, unfortunately, either got hurt, or as far as, there's a lot of, I've seen on the CTV, Global News, basement fires. And this is a big thing in municipalities. And I would just absolutely feel horrible if I found out that we had anything to do with putting somebody in an unsafe situation. So it's a very difficult one. And it's one that it goes to insurance as well.
Yeah, let's talk about the insurance for a second, just so I can highlight a couple of things to be aware of. One, Eryn, when you say safety and injury, it highlights one of the issues that comes up a lot for registrants who call in. First of all, you need to know that a professional liability policy covers professional services. It is not intended to cover a broad range of risks you have as a business, which case you should buy a business insurance policy or an office package, which would include something called commercial general liability. And that's for slips and falls and injuries and so on. So the RICO policy actually has included in it some bodily injury coverage, but it's quite limited in scope to try and address some shortages in insurance that we've experienced in the commercial marketplace, because RICO does not have a mandate to provide general liability insurance. Brokerages, salespeople, brokers should all be arranging that themselves. Just like if you work out of your home, you should be calling your homeowner's insurance and saying, hey, I have an office and sometimes people come by my house to meet me for business purposes. If you're not disclosing that to your homeowner's insurance, you might be negating your homeowner's insurance if you have a claim. So it doesn't cover everything, and that's one thing I really want people to take away, is that while we have the broadest coverage in the country for professional liability for realtors, again, this is Ontario, we don't cover everything under the sun, and you should really be buying this separate policy. So there's a limit of the coverage, which just increased to $100,000 this year for bodily injury. So if somebody perishes in a fire in a basement apartment and they say it was your professional duty to protect me from that, the max we could pay is $100,000. And frankly, I'm not even sure it would apply to that claim, because the way it's structured is to try and cover you for situations where you're, on site with the client, like attending at the property, which is for sale. Now that it's been rented and you're living in it for a year, and then something happens, I'm not even sure if the coverage would respond. So the brokerage might buy a policy that could cover you, but there's several pitfalls in that policy that would mean that it wouldn't cover individual salespeople and brokers because they're subcontractors. So that's pitfall one, is that, the bodily injury side of things. And pitfall two, and this is just purely a risk management standpoint, your reputation is super important. And this would be crippling to anybody's reputation to have been involved in this kind of event. So that's really something to take away as a business, like as a brokerage or as a broker or salesperson. Is it worth the risk to me to have my name splashed all over a claim against me? Because anything that's filed in the courts is publicly available. So if somebody sues you for something, you can find records of it. And if they search your name on the internet, you might just come up. So it's a reputation risk piece that's something to be aware of. Again, this is not, it's not a RICO issue. It's not about, ethics and so on. I think if you disclose and you do all your due diligence on that side, you might be okay. I don't know, you'd have to consult a lawyer. But from just a risk management standpoint, I would say, think about your reputation and think about whether or not you really have coverage for the worst case scenario. And I'll tell you, $100,000 is not enough to cover somebody who got seriously injured or even died.
Yeah. Yeah, and then of course the moral side of things, I would just feel horrible. But and I think we go into basement apartments and we can usually see some pretty big red flags as real estate agents right away. Is there a walkout? Is there enough exits? Are the windows big enough? Is there sprinklers? Is there carbon monoxide detectors? Is a gas stove in a basement with no backsplash and all the rest of it? So these are some red flags. And if it looks like a safe basement apartment, why would the landlord not register it? Are they thinking from a tax perspective? Maybe if they registered it, are they going to pay more taxes if the government knows they have a basement apartment, finished basement, all the rest of it? But I got to tell you, it's worth it. And we have a guy, his name's Paul, and he was Paul the fire guy, and we call him a lot. And maybe in the show notes we can put his number in there. The reason why we call him is because when somebody comes into our office and says, "Listen, I want to put put this up for lease, and it's, and my first question is it legalized? Is it registered with the town? And they said, well, I don't know. And well, call the town, find out. If it's not, why not have Paul come in? Paul comes in, he does a full report. He tells you what you have to do to make sure it's safe. He's an ex-fireman and all the rest of it. So he does a great job of making sure that the basement apartments are safe. And if we can get a certificate from him saying that he's gone through and done all this sort of stuff, you know what? You've done your due diligence to have a safe environment. And listen, if it's a couple thousand, Linus, you had mentioned that it was quite expensive to have that basement apartment legalized, or let's say safetied. And maybe registered with the town. But in the end, does your resale go up? Do you now have a happier tenant so that they're going to be there? And we all know from a landlord standpoint, if you have a happy tenant, your life's happy. And if you have a miserable tenant that starts holding you ransom because they'll tell the municipality that you're in an illegal basement apartment, they'll call the town on you, and that's the reason why they're late in the rent. We've had people refuse to pay because, hey, why do I have to pay? This is non-retrofit legal. And you throw all these words out there: illegal basement apartment. So they use it against the landlord. So in the end, if you're a landlord, have it legalized, have it safetied, have somebody come in like Paul, and then you mitigate a lot of risks. Have a happy tenant, and it's a great. That would be a positive rental experience.
Well, my professional liability antenna just went way up. I was like, hold on a second. You're going to go in as a realtor, as a registrant, and you're going to say whether something's safe or not? Yeah, call Paul. Make sure you don't overstep what I don't understand the fire ratings of various backsplashes and so on. As an insurance broker, I could go into, I could go into any grocery store and go, wow, look at all of those compressors. You need you need this insurance, and you've got massive, problems if the power goes out. But I could not tell you what make or model of fridge that is and what the best maintenance approach is or whatever. I would throw in my last note on that to say, know what your area of expertise is and call in the right people when you don't have it.
100%. That's awesome.
And it's something we talk about a lot. Like, you're a facilitator as a real estate agent. You don't have to know everything. There's nothing wrong with hiring a photographer to take photos, hiring someone, for their professional advice in different situations, right? So you don't feel like you have to do it all.
There's a great line that says, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Get that network of people, and it doesn't hurt to check and see if they have the right insurance too. We could talk about drones another time.
I just got one, actually. And Linus, if you're ever looking for advice in terms of cars, Ryan is also a car enthusiast. In fact, Ryan, didn't you do blogs? Yeah,
I used to review cars. Many moons ago, I used to have a blog, and I would review cars on my blog. It's gone now, but if you search around, you can still see my video review of a few cars lingering about.
So Linus, there you go. You got 300,000 kilometers on your car. It's dying. Maybe Ryan can point you in the right direction on a reliable car that gets you 600,000.
Well, I wouldn't want him reviewing my car. I don't think it would get a really good review, being a 12-year-old minivan.
Oh, well, you know what? I've not met a car that I don't like for some reason, except for one, which, because I don't want to be sued, I'm not going to say what it was.
Well, mine's got character, that's for sure.
I do have my favorites, and if you're looking for a really, really great car that kind of checks all the boxes for most people, Mazda CX-5, man, that car, I've quote unquote sold more of those to friends and family, and I've never regretted steering somebody in that direction.
Well, maybe it's going to be just a few short days before I'm going to be looking up that alley too. So maybe a Mazda will be in my future. So I think we're going to stop the show here, just wind her down with a little bit of an outro. Ryan, thanks so much for coming on. It was a pleasure talking to you. Eryn, pleasure as always as well. If you like the show, subscribe to our show pretty much wherever you find your podcasts online. And please don't forget to give us a 5-star review on those sites, because it really does help. You can check out our website at livingthedream.show, where you can check out and listen to any or all of our shows. Or you can head over to our YouTube channel at youtube.livingthedream.show to watch our podcast video streams on demand. If you'd like to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us anytime at podcast@livingthedream.show. Show. Eryn and Ryan, thanks again for joining us. Everybody, thanks for watching. Have a great week.